welcome to this edition of the Silicon Grapevine with me, Nitin Dahad. On this episode, I'll be talking to Lars Reger, CTO of NXP Semiconductors. In the interview, we'll explore what drives Lars and what he is passionate about. Our conversation ranges from the consequences of the chip industry becoming mainstream and CHIPS Acts and the nonsense of deglobalization, as he calls it, and how to remain relevant and more in the industry. We also touch on things like skills and what advice he'd give to young Lars today. So let's get straight to my chat with Lars and see what he has to say.
Hi Nitin, good afternoon.
We're going to do a little bit more of a sort of deep dive into some of the things you're passionate about. I know whenever we speak to you, you're always speaking very passionately. I sometimes think you're not German, you're Italian or Mediterranean. But anyway, I think...
Who knows which offspring of which genetic pool I am, yeah?
Exactly. So welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
Let's start by a little bit about... EE Times did a sort of interview with you maybe about just under a year ago. Mm-hmm. And you talked about some of the things you wanted to be when you were young. And I sort of picked up you wanted to be a deep sea diver, astronaut, etc.
True, yeah.
And actually, deep sea diving is probably, given some of the current affairs, not so topical right now. It is topical right now. But anyway, I think you wanted to be a doctor as well and then pivoted to electronics.
Yes. Yeah, so I can clearly tell you my family is glad that I did not realize all my dreams. Also, astronaut would not have been what the family would have appreciated. But of course, these dreams give you loads of energy, regardless of where you are, right? I mean, this is how I use it, as a source of energy. Imagination, try to explain the world to myself, and then you start falling over inconsistencies in your own story. And very often, these topics are then the topics that determine your career moving forward. Yeah.
So, are you happy with the way your career has gone? I mean, you are now at the top of your game in the electronics industry, in the semiconductor industry. I'm sure there's more to come, but are you happy so far?
Absolutely, yes. But I also have to say it was never my dream to be where I am at the moment. And if you would have asked me, even 10 years ago, would you like to be a CTO of such a semiconductor company like NXP is, I would have clearly said, no, that's not my dream. Being where I am, I have to say, so it was unplanned, but definitely the perfect spot.
Okay, and what's been the highlight of the 25 plus years that you've been in industry, and what would you say has been the biggest disappointment? It's always nice to know sort of what really sort of made you proud, and then what made you disappointed.
Yeah, disappointments are, of course, where you see things not turning out as you had wished them to turn out or you had planned for them. I mean, there is always detours in the career, in every career, where you have to say, okay, I thought businesses, opportunities are developing better. But also things where, for example, standardization destroys business opportunities. What I have in mind very clearly is I had very high hopes in DSRC-based car-to-car communication, these type of things. You pump loads of calories into developing that market. Then standardization, politics block certain moves, other technology come in. Maybe it's even in the end to the better of the entire ecosystem. But that are, of course, the energy drains, I would say, where you have the feeling you have done whatever you could do as a person, and that was not enough. To the contrary, other topics are where we had these crazy dreams. I had the crazy dream to having radar one chips at some point in time, to being able at some point in time to send and receive 80 gigahertz radar signals via cheap CMOS electronics. And look where we are with the industry now, precisely 10 years after we had started playing with that CMOS technologies and radar, and how great that is, and how much more opportunities to the future these type of technologies give. I mean, these are the light and shadow exercises maybe out of the last 10 years, just to corner some of them.
So I suppose that was a very roundabout way of saying, you're excited about everything.
And I mean, so important point, because maybe it's more an attitude, being curious and try to play with what you have in front of you than to wait for the perfect job to come along and that all has to be painted like in a fantastic movie or whatsoever. Life is not that way, but trying to have fun with everything that you have in front of you gives you energy. You need to find something that pulls you out of bed every morning. Otherwise, you can never do this for 40 years. And that was maybe the overshadowing factor in my entire work life. I did very different jobs. I worked in quality management, where a lot of people say, yeah, but that's boring. No, it is not. But you have to define it as, this is interesting. What can I do? How can I make the difference? How can I move the needle? How can I be relevant to my environment? And the strong factor, of course, for me personally is I wanted to do something that others can recognize. Already as a kid, so very simple, very honest, wanted to do something to show that I'm a cool dude, yeah. So doing sports, doing windsurfing, so there was a drive behind that, of course. And if you search these topics, then and with a positive attitude, you will make a difference. Yeah.
I can relate to the cool dude thing. When I was at school, I remember trying to recite pi to a number of places to all the people in school and really impressing them and talking about laser.
Nitin, this I often start my keynote speeches with a little picture of saying, okay, who of you doesn't have the childhood dream of changing the world? And you know that 90% in the audience say, yeah. And by the way, what was my childhood dream? And by the way, where am I now? Did I achieve it or not? And just out of that, you have the audience with you, because that is one of the very, very deep topics, of course. When you are retired, you will sit on a bench again, maybe with your grandkids, and say, okay, have I landed where I was dreaming to land as a kid? I think that is the only source of energy that can pull you forcefully through your work life.
Yeah, that's interesting. But let's go to semiconductors. When I started, I guess, over 30 years ago, lots of change in the electronics industry, and particularly semiconductors. It's now mainstream, and that means a lot of attention. Was it better when you were sort of doing things behind the scenes and nobody really knew about it? And now everybody knows every detail about the semiconductor supply chain and issues. And what can you do to influence it now that you have a voice in mainstream sort of policy making?
No, so for me, very honestly, it is much, much better now, because that was a terrible uphill battle to explain to everyone what you already know, right? I mean, 90% of all modern innovation in modern devices, modern cars, modern smart home devices, 90% plus is driven by electronics. And a lot of the people in the supply chain downstream think, okay, as it's semiconductors off the shelf, I get that stuff, and why should I bother with that stuff? I mean, it's coming like air, it's all around me, commoditized, no need to pay attention. That has, of course, big time changed over the last 4 years. The importance is seen, and even some of the guys, the head of the Munich Security Conference, invited my boss and me last year and said, "Can you come by?" And I said, "Why to Munich Security Conference?" And he said, "Well, Lars, 40 years ago we have discussed where to put cruise missiles globally, and now we are discussing how to deal with supply chain resilience, especially in semiconductors." So having that huge shift in strategic importance brings a lot of opportunities. Not everything is nice and shiny. Of course, if you are labeled as strategically important, you get also a lot of attention that might pull you sideways. All clear, but by and large, much, much better if people try to understand what you can bring to the party and try to help you make this resilient, robust, and help you to move the needle. Yeah. So from that angle, huge opportunity and fantastic.
It is, and I think I feel quite excited by that as well, actually, because even when I started, everybody thought I was a geek. So I think it's nice now to semiconductors are not geeks.
Yeah, I mean, you for sure recognize these question marks in your face when you're at a party and they tell you, or they ask you, what have you studied? And you say physics. And the first one's like, oh, okay. And where are you working? Semiconductor industry. Okay. And then you see the question mark, not sure whether I need to spend the entire evening with that guy. Yeah. So, because he's such a nerd. So that was, of course, the history. In the meantime, of course, we can show how important these innovations, the technology is to address the global challenges that we face. So elderly population, how can you have a world that anticipates and automates systems that help you? Having a networked world, remote control your assets regardless of where they are, or help your parents, even if they are far away and you don't need home care all the time if you're just well connected. But also climate change. I mean, you can protest against global warming, or, and this is what I try to do, is I try to convince our youngsters, say, help me engineer against or with climate change. I mean, let's use all our capabilities and let's see what we can do. Carbon free transportation, better sensors. If you have adverse weather phenomena, what can we do with our faster warning systems and how can we protect and adjust? And there is so much that we can do. And we do not even need to do that because we are all good corporate citizens. You can be successful in business with that. Yeah. So, I mean, how cool is that in terms of capabilities that we have in front of us?
Exactly. Just going back to the semiconductors being mainstream in 2022, last year, I've been to so many weddings and social functions, and people ask me, "Oh, tell us about the chip shortage." So yes, that's kind of where it's got to now. Yeah, weddings.
No, indeed, and I mean, like 2021, everyone was a virologist. Now a lot of people are semiconductor specialists, and also there. That helps us also on the financial community, because a lot of people try to understand the industry dynamics. How many years does it take to build a factory? How quickly can you build a semiconductor? Just these really, really basic questions, and from where, which material is coming, what is the geopolitics and the shift there. And I mean, even anecdotes. I was asked same time frame by people at weddings, why is the semiconductor industry collapsing? Why are you letting everyone know? And I was like, hey, wait a second. We are shipping 1.5 times more than pre-pandemic, but the demand has doubled. So with 1.5 times, I'm nowhere. But our shops are sold out. So the coolest place to be is in a sold-out shop. I mean, at least commercially, right? I mean,
exactly.
That was this myth-busting discussion on the topic, and so helped me even at the parties to be in a more interesting candidate.
Exactly.
And more regardless.
And that sort of leads us to CHIPS Acts. Everybody's doing CHIPS Acts, and they're everywhere. I like to call it. They're calling it for. The industry, we are calling for pragmatic decoupling, as in be aware of some of the connectivity in the supply chains. But I think policymakers are very strong in sort of making sure everything is produced. And I mean, I think I read a headline about India, for example, now doing something where they're going to put in a 40 nanometer fab an operational by end of 2024, which is very ambitious, but I think who knows in greenfield what can be done. Tell us a little bit about what you can do to convince policymakers of the importance of that connected supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, you described it very well. I mean, everyone is, of course, looking into at the moment, how do I get my supply chain very resilient? Now, there is, as always, on every spectrum, there is these very extremists that say we have to have very soon as possible, semiconductor autarkicity. Sorry, but that's nonsense. Yeah, autarkicity doesn't make sense. And I'm very sensitive to the language there as well. I hate it to talk about deglobalization, because that sounds like Nitin in the UK, Lars in Germany, we are all sitting in our little silos and try to drive autarkicity. Exactly. Totally nonsense, undoable, not only from a money point of view. If Europe would like to be semiconductor autark, we would need 600 to 800 billion euro. The same in the US, $700 billion. I mean, take any number between 5 and 900. So huge money. And we are sitting on CHIPS Acts of 50 billion each, and the other countries are in same regimes.
Yes.
So in other words, deglobalization to that local for local way of working does not work, not financially, but also you don't have the skills in one region. Therefore, reglobalization makes sense. So if certain parts of the globalized world are bailing out of that network, the rest has to stay firmly together and has to maybe even strengthen its skills, and we have to leverage the activities. When I was asked last year by European but also by American politicians, Lars, what should we do? My answer was I would form the NATO of semiconductors. And
yes.
don't get me wrong. So I mean, all militaristic language around Ukraine.
Exactly.
Take it out of the picture. But what I mean by that is the concept of the NATO is not every army has the same capabilities and does the same. But together, as an alliance of friendly territories that share the same values and the same business principles, that gets very, very, very mighty, and you have very small states and you have large armies in, and very different skills, but together it is sort of a should I say globalized army there in that case? What I mean is, of course, a globalized semiconductor ecosystem. And there had been countries from Southeast Asia after that pitch, and they called me and said, we are not exactly North Atlantic, but can we please join? Yeah? So that concept starts to resonate with a lot of nations. And in my opinion, that makes a lot of sense because we need diverse teams. We need a global span. For us, like a semiconductor company, it starts to be fun only if we sell more than 500 million pieces of a single chip. Semiconductors is all about scale and heavy investment. And therefore, if we are only small and localized, we have to push a lot of this high cost to the end customers, or we are dirt slow in our innovation. But if I move all this cost to the end customers, what am I building? Well, I'm building an Inflation Acceleration Act.
Yeah, exactly.
So therefore, I have to be ultra careful to not do that. And globalization or reglobalization helps us, of course, cure that disease a bit. Yeah?
Do you think we're succeeding in convincing the policymakers?
Yeah. Nitin, very honestly, I think I was positively shocked how many people were asking us, try to understand the ecosystem. And then I was very, very positively surprised how pragmatic, how supportive the European Union, the member states, the US, Indian policymakers are. And it was really like the main prominent question was, guys, how can we help you with that industry? What can we do from our side to participate on the one side, of course, to benefit on the other side, but also to keep the current economics intact. And there I have to say I have not had a single stupid discussion with a political decision maker. This was always good, and I'm talking about the last 3 years especially. Yeah.
That's basically saying that you're sort of eliminating a lot of the ignorance. So I think that's actually quite good.
And I mean, so very honestly, I mean, a lot of people did not know about semiconductors, but they did not shy away from it. They tried to understand, and I'm very, very positively surprised. I could even say, because of course, what is transported in the public about the political ecosystem, about industry associations, and so on, is sometimes the very, very opposite, and I cannot confirm that at all. On our side, I think it is really positive. Yeah.
Okay. Now I know it said at the beginning you're quite passionate, but I want you to tell me, what are you really most passionate about today? And I don't just mean tech. What sort of drives you? What drives Lars Reger today?
Yeah, so what I try, of course, to understand is, for me personally, for my environment, is what are technical disruptions bringing to us. And the disruption, like many of us, the disruption that I oversee least is the power of AI and machine learning. I mean, we are maybe at the moment in the phase after the early innovations of the steam engine 200 years ago, where you see something coming. Hey, that's also not exactly, you cannot grab it with your hands what it can do, but the industrial revolution that this thing does in the next coming 20, 30 years is huge and massive. Not always to the positive, but it's a major overhaul of the labor market and so on. So that is going to come. And now, of course, what I try to understand as well is how to use this and how to demystify it and how to also get a bit the small steps implemented. Meaning, I can have fully autonomous systems with more emotions and better language than I have. But that is not what I think where AI will help me in the next 10 years. AI and machine learning will help me in better detection systems. So camera detection, who is in the front of my house, is it just a tree moving in the wind, or is it a burglar or a family member? We have chips for insulin pumps. Yes. There, of course, I would like to have anomaly detection telling my health monitoring system, Lars has today a very different insulin level like the last 2 years. Potentially, he should not be in the driver's seat of his car going forward. So there can be a lot of tiny systems, efficient systems in this world around us that anticipates and automates, I would call it in my Marcom language, and they're understanding how we use these capabilities to take the next big step forward. That is what makes me tick at the moment. Yeah.
Excellent. And so, I mean, you touched on AI and more generally, I mean, in semiconductors. Do you think we have the skills and what can be done to sort of develop those skills?
Well, of course, we don't have the skills over the next fortnight. But as I said, I mean, this is a time horizon. Typically, steam engine, 20, 30 years, industrial footprint changes, 20, 30 years. What we had claimed is going to happen in the beginning of 90s in terms of smartphones and the funny form factors for watches and so on, we have 25 to 30 years later. So it is hugely taking quite some time, and we also have the chance to rework the talent base. I mean, I know very little parents that today tell their kids, like 30 years ago, you should study mechanical engineering, that is where the gold is in future. I mean, today the universities are dropping in mechanical engineering studies, but it is like data engineering, modern sciences, computer sciences, so all of that. And of course, you see that demographic change. We need to make sure that we have the best talent that can also train on the job and train the workforce. So for sure, but I could also not do this 40 years ago. For sure, you cannot, let's say, leave university and say, okay, learning is over, now I only work until retirement. I mean, that was illusion all the time. And so from that angle, I think we gained a lot of degrees of freedom also by playing with modern technology. And the pandemics, as nasty as it was, also has helped us. I mean, we had forecasts that maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, people start absorbing home office capabilities, especially, of course, in governmental departments, in legal and so on. The pandemic showed us within 2 weeks that you can teach via video conferences, that we can chat here via a video con, that you can talk to thousands of people without flying around the globe to give a keynote, and so on. So these type of crises, disruptive moments, have always moved the advancement of society, and they will. And AI and machine learning is at the moment the next one. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's bring this to a close. So what's the one piece of tech you can't live without today?
Well, very honestly, sounds a bit old-fashioned, but it is my mobile phone. Yeah. And the mobile phone is for me, I mean, all other form factors, smartwatch or whatsoever aside, the mobile phone is for me the keyhole to looking from the analog world into my digital twins, into the digital twin of my car, of my house, of a factory, of my health system. So in principle, what we have done at NXP is we have taken ultra-wideband to have car access. We have a mobile phone payment. So I've stolen already your keyring, and I've stolen your wallet and stuffed it into your mobile phone. And so from that, I can, I think, live without a lot of electronics, except from that device, that private device of connectivity, payment, security, and so on.
Excellent. That's a really good. And finally, I'm sure this will be something that youngsters will probably want to take on in terms of wisdom or advice, whether they're starting up or whether they're deciding what career to take. What's the advice you'd give to young Lars, knowing what you do now?
Well, I give the advice at the moment to young Leah, because my daughter just last Friday finished high school. So we had a nice party at the weekend at home, of course. And you can imagine, I mean, my oldest son is 21 studying physics. The youngest one is 16. And I mean, in that ecosystem, we have a lot of discussion, soul search. Long story very short, I think the first advice is, be clear what energizes you, but do not try to overplan, because the only things that did not work in my life is the stuff that I really tried to plan in detail. So the overarching story, I want to do something for mankind, I want to be recognized for that. I mean, these energy factors, they will not change. But what exactly it will be, unplannable, not over 20, 30 years. The other part is, it has to be an attitude. Where you are, there is the interesting job and there is fun, and not you are waiting to get offered an interesting job and fun. So it is much more what you inject into the system. You will hear the echo very soon, and then it's still time to react. So with that, do what you like to do, and if needed, okay, adapt. But don't try to overplan it. And I think that's for a lot of our youngsters very important, because my kids, they are leaving school a year earlier than I do due to changes in the German school systems. They don't have a military service anymore. And my oldest son even was going to school a year earlier in Bavaria than I did. So he is finishing high school 3 years earlier than I did. And I mean, these 3 years had been massive in at least getting more experience of what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and so on. So I think for the younger kids, try it, but don't worry too much if you still have to change direction. Don't do it too easily. Don't search the easiest way out. So get in for Champions League, but don't be afraid of adapting. That's maybe the preaching from that, yeah?
Excellent advice, I think, Lars. Lars, thank you very much.
Nitin, my pleasure, as always. It's fun.
Well, yes, that's such good advice. Don't overplan. Thank you to my guest, Lars Reger, who was my guest today on the Silicon Grapevine. I am Nitin Darhad, and I hope to see you on the next show.